Bien, merci d'être... Vous m'entendez? Oui, ça va, parce qu'avec la voix que j'ai. Merci d'être venus nombreux pour cette conférence sur un sujet qui nous tient tous à cœur et qui nous permet d'accueillir notre collègue et amie Silvia Einaudi, qui est une grande spécialiste du livre des morts, bien évidemment. Elle a été l'éditrice tout récemment d'un magnifique volume consacré à des études très pointues sur le célèbre livre des morts de Annie, qui est conservé au British Museum, qui est un des plus beaux, si ce n'est le plus beau livre des morts d'Égypte. Silvia est professeure d'égyptologie à l'université de Cagliari en Sardaigne. Et elle est co-directeur de la mission d'études de la TT33, la tombe 33 dans la Sassif à Thèbes, de laquelle l'université de Cagliari est aussi partenaire depuis peu, me semble-t-il. Donc depuis des années, Silvia s'occupe non seulement des textes funéraires conservés dans la tombe, mais également de l'administration et de la gestion de la mission, ce qui n'est pas une mince affaire, comme savent tous ceux qui ont eu à affronter ce genre de difficultés. Je ne vais pas vous énumérer les multiples publications de Silvia parce que vous seriez encore là demain soir, donc vous avez peut-être des occupations, mais autres. Mais en tout cas, elle a en relation avec son travail dans les tombes thébaines de la Sassif publié un livre qui fait autorité et qui met en relation pour faire écho à la grammaire du temple, la grammaire de la tombe, c'est-à-dire le fonctionnement rituel de la tombe par rapport aux textes qui sont gravés dans cette tombe et en gros au cheminement que l'on doit parcourir en suivant le parcours, je me répète, le parcours rituel des tombes. So, briefly, if you don't understand French, Silvia is a great specialist of the Book of the Dead, and she is going to talk about this particular subject. She is also the co-director of the mission of the TT33 in the Asasif in Thebes, and in this tomb she is studying the Book of the Dead copied on the tomb, and she is the big manager of all the mission, which is a very difficult job. She has published many books, and especially the one book explaining how works the tombs concerning the liturgical way we can following the text written on the tomb, and so it is a very important book which is well known now, I think. So what else? She is also specialist in the hieratic text, and she works also with the Russian mission in Thebes in TT23, where she is studying a very important unique text written in hieratic in a private tomb at Thebes, dating from the New Kingdom. So what else? Qu'est-ce que je peux dire d'autre? Rien, si ce n'est que nous allons avoir plaisir à l'écouter. So please, Silvia, thank you.
Bonsoir, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much, Annie, for this presentation. Now I want to go directly into the subject of this lecture, which will be about the Book of the Dead, but from a material point of view. The Book of the Dead, as we know them, usually convey to the observer an impression of complete uniformity, both regarding the textual content and the accompanying vignettes. The most finely crafted specimens, you can see here some of them, the famous Book of the Dead of Ka, the Book of the Dead of Ani, of course, the Book of the Dead of Yatesnacht in Hieratic, the Book of the Dead of EPHE in the Turin Museum, were produced for members of the elite and were written and illustrated by highly trained scribes and draftsmen who devoted particular attention to the manuscript's quality. So the harmony of the composition and ultimately to the aesthetic value of the finished work. Nevertheless, this pursuit of perfection did not preclude the occurrence of intentional discontinuities and discrepancies, or of conspicuous, albeit unintentional, mechanical errors which appear in both the texts and the vignettes, as we will see. Falling within the first category, so the occurrence of intentional discontinuities, is the occurrence of different types of script employed within a single papyrus, the so-called digraphia, and often, but not always, intended to highlight texts of distinct nature and function. This phenomenon can be observed in two well-known manuscripts, which I shall take here as examples, the Book of the Dead of Ani and the so-called Greenfield Papyri, both in the British Museum in London. The Book of the Dead of Ani, dated to the 19th dynasty around 1275 BC, and probably from Thebes, belonged to this man who had among his titles those of royal scribe and scribe of the divine offerings for all the gods of Thebes. Its inscribed portions measures more than 23 meters in length and 38 centimeters in height. And it is composed of 80 sheets of papyri, each varying in length from 29.6 to 34.7 centimeters. Almost the entire manuscript is written in the so-called cursive or linear hieroglyphs, that is to say, simplified signs, but less simplified than hieratic. This script was generally used for Book of the Dead papyri during the New Kingdom. In Ani's manuscript, this writing is normally, but not always, employed in the so-called retrograde orientation, as you can see here in this plate from the article by Giuseppina Lenzo, with the hieroglyph signs so facing to the right and the direction of reading from left to right. However, on sheets 1, 2, 3, and 36, they are highlighted in red, the hieroglyphs are large and highly detailed. These are the so-called monumental hieroglyphs, as they resemble those carved on monuments' wall, and they are not retrograde. The texts who are written in these monumental hieroglyphs are an hymn to the sun god, sheet 1, hymn to Osiris, sheet 2, the waiting of the heart spell, so spell 125, and in sheet 36, another hymn to Osiris. The texts written in this particularly refined writing, so this monumental script, you can see them here on the right part of this image, are for the most part so hymns. Such compositions are probably drawn from the liturgical domain within the temple context, where they were recited during rituals. Therefore, the choice of these carefully rendered hieroglyphs was likely intended to emphasize the importance of this kind of texts for which templates, presumably already in hieroglyphs, were followed. Some spells are also written using this monumental script. In most cases, these are large panels, so you can see the parts highlighted in blue, with long chapters, often associated with scenes and vignettes integrated into the text. It is likely that for the other spells, which are in cursive script, model papyri, also in cursive script, were instead employed. Thus, the difference between cultic text recited in ritual settings and texts with theoretically operative function, so for instance spells to ensure the deceased's ability to drink water, to eat, to breathe, was immediately noticeable. It appears, therefore, that the use of different scripts within a single manuscript reflects primarily the typologies, we could say the genre of the text, religious, liturgical, symbolic, or operative, and only secondarily the scribal practices, or the models, the templates, the forlage employed. These different practices and different types of script were themselves instrumental in conveying the intended nature of the text themselves. As Antonio Loprieno writes, the choice of script was distributionally motivated by textual genre and material support, hieroglyphs being basically associated with royalty and religion, hieratic with more worldly textual contents. Florence Albert, who has also investigated this topic, has nevertheless shown that in some manuscripts this theoretical rule is not strictly observed, since the use of different scripts simply reflects the use of different templates by the scribe, depending on what was available in the archives, without any discernible scriptural or graphic coherence in the choices he made. A similar shift passage in script is observed in the so-called Greenfield Papyrus, the longest Book of the Dead papyrus known so far. It's over 37 meters in length. Its owner was the priestess of Amun, Nestane Beti Isheru, daughter of the high priest of Amun, Pinejam II. She lived under the 21st dynasty around 950 BC. She was buried in TT 320, so the famous royal cachette in Deir el-Bahari, and their papyrus most likely comes from this tomb as well. In this case, most of the texts and spells are written in hieratic, as you can see on the right, except 3 complete sheets containing spell 125b, so the so-called negative confession, written in hieroglyphs, as you can see. The legends in the vignettes and the gods' words in the major scenes are also written in hieroglyphs with different degrees of simplification. As in the Book of the Dead of Ani, the use of hieroglyphs for this spell 125 is likely related to the fundamental significance of this text for the deceased. Its importance and sacred character are further emphasized by, as you can see, the tabular structure with, you see that the inscription is written inside a naos, with a striking visual impact that immediately draws the eye when the manuscript is examined. The use of different scripts for texts belonging to different genres and intended to serve distinct functions is by no means limited to the Book of the Dead, as the next two Theban tombs clearly show. The first one is the tomb of Antephoker TT60, a tomb dated to the Middle Kingdom around 1900 BC. Here, in this tomb, Antephoker was vizier of Sesostris I, and in his tomb, two well-known scenes are attested with a couple of harpists and some inscriptions in cursive hieroglyphs associated with these two scenes. On the east wall of the shrine, so this first image, the text of the lyrics sung by the harpists contain a wish of health for the deceased, while on the south wall of another room, of the south wall of the same room but another plate here, so up here, the lyrics are addressed to Hathor, and the lyrics says, "Turn to me your heart, lady of fragrance." We could consider this a kind of love song to the goddess. Summarizing Loprieno's analysis, it may be stated that in this tomb, the funerary texts which aim more urgently at eternity are written in monumental hieroglyphs, so most of the text of the tomb. Here, for instance, in the upper part, and also this here. Whereas the words sung by the harpists with a worldly textual content are written in a more cursive style, resembling the hieratic script. The second example is the one I showed already during this academy, is the tomb of Chai TT23. Here, on the east wall of the courtyard, which is entirely decorated with scenes and hieroglyphs text, there is a long hieratic text. This is the copy made by Davies and now kept in Oxford, the Griffith Institute. And this hieratic inscription carved on the wall contains the idealized autobiography of the deceased. Unfortunately, the text is now largely fragmentary. The exceptional use of hieratics in this context can be explained by the fact that the text was not perceived as a ritual one. It is not a hymn, nor an invocation to a god, as those, for instance, inscribed on the nearby stele of the tomb. But it was intended probably as a literary text. And Chai sought to emphasize this diversity by employing for his autobiography a different script, probably the same one used on the manuscript, on the template, on papyrus, used as a model. And perhaps also to highlight his training and his role as a royal scribe. We discussed about this yesterday also with Nathalie Sojic, particularly skilled in writing in this particular hieratic style. But while the use of different scripts was certainly not a matter of chance or carelessness, and was intended to be noticed, the scribe wanted to show clearly the difference between one text and another, the situation is different as concerns errors or mistakes, which occur in varying numbers across the manuscripts, both in the text and in the vignettes. As concerns the text, these errors consist of omissions or additions of words or sentences, whole sentences, lapses of memory, grammatical confusions, lexical mistakes, errors in signs. For instance, some of these errors were probably due to the transition from hieratic, the template in hieratic, and the hieroglyphic used for the copy. And also changes probably reflecting the use of elements from the contemporary language, New Egyptian versus Middle Egyptian. With regard to the vignettes, if the space allocated for the figurative sections was poorly calculated during the document's layout, a misalignment could sometimes occur between the text and its vignette. In many cases, these lapses of attention are often due to the long and at times exhausting work of the scribe, resulting in the skipping or, conversely, the repetition of a portion of the text, or misreading of a letter of a word which was confused with another due to the similar script, or failure to modify a pronoun or an ending, for example, from masculine to feminine, when the text needed to be adapted to a new owner. On other occasions, however, the errors reflect the faithful direct copying of a corrupted template that the scribe had before him included the reproduction of original mistakes. The most frequent errors are haplography, the omission of the word over an entire expression or group of letters when it immediately follows an identical word, expression, or group of letters. This is opposite of dictography, so the erroneous repetition of the same word or group of letters, especially when changing line or page. Parablesis, the inadvertent omission of all material, all part of text occurring between a word and the next occurrence of the same word. Let us now examine some papyri and their errors, so you better understand what I'm meaning now, beginning with the Book of the Dead of Ani. The book of, despite the scribal profession of Ani, who was a royal scribe, he acquired a ready-made document from stock. And Giuseppina Lenzo has shown that multiple scribes, possibly 6, likely from the same workshop, worked on it. Even though very skilled, as evidenced by the generally high quality of the writing, they still made some occasional errors due to lapses of attention. First of all, this papyrus purchased by Ani had many blank spaces left open for the insertion of Ani's names and titles. In several places, his name has been added by a later hand. It happened normally in this kind of papyri, using a lighter ink or a red pen with a thicker tip, You can see some examples here or here. You can see that the writing and the thickness of the line are different. And in some instances, the name of Ani is written with in a less elaborate form of the cursive hieroglyph script. The scribe who filled in Ani's name wrote hastily without paying much attention to what he was doing. On sheet 5, to the left, for instance, which is part of the title of the papyrus. So this is the very beginning of the papyrus. And on sheet number 17, he wrote the name of Ani twice. On sheet 18, you see to the left, and 34, so here and here, he omitted the determinatives, and the name was totally, completely forgotten here, here, and here, sheets 22, 28, and 12. Other mistakes are also attested. For instance, the 7th and final section of spell 147 on sheet 12 contains a mistake due to a scribe's oversight. The number here, this is the text of gate number 7, but the number inscribed in red in the last column to the right, above the vignette with the green portal, is in fact 6. You can see very clear the 6 vertical strokes instead of 7. So there are twice gate number 6, then the gate number 6, and then gate number 8. In spell 133, the next sheet, the final rubric, the colophon, was shortened to fit within the space already allocated in the first column. So the scribe had to finish the colophon here, so he had to shorten the last part of the inscription. So the part you can see here in brackets is missing. So when the dead see him, they will fall. No, it's not written. And then it starts with, on their faces, he will be seen in the afterlife as a messenger of Ra. Mykola Tarasenko also highlighted that 9 sections, so quite a lot, of spell 17 are missing in Ani's Book of the Dead, whereas the vignette is among the most complete known in Book of the Dead Papyri. This vignette is very long, with numerous scenes in their fullest extent, very detailed and very well executed. So spell 17, which extends across 4 sheets from 7 to 10, is thus provided with a truly remarkable frieze of vignettes. You all know this detail. We are in Ifao. Despite the fact that the text was shortened and several sections are missing. So they put more attention, they paid more attention to the vignettes than to the text itself. Some inaccuracies are also evident in the text layout. In the first sheet 16, a continuous yellow line here, running from top to bottom, that separates the title and the beginning of the next spell 44, was drawn so in the wrong position, or we must infer that the scribe should have started the spell here under the vignette before, after these thick yellow lines. The same applies here, where the draftsman also made a mistake in, in pairing two vignettes, because the text of spell 93 is followed by that of spell 43, but the artist mistakenly associated the scene of spell 43 with the text of 93 and vice versa. So you have to read the vignettes in the other way. This is a case very similar to the one I showed you at the beginning. As for the Greenfield papyrus, this, also in this very finely crafted papyrus, significant errors are made, even though they are few. Most of them are minor scribal errors, or possibly errors that were already in the templates that the scribe used to copy the papyrus. In particular, the scribe misunderstood words that sound similar or mistakenly confused similar signs. The scribe also often uses the masculine instead of the feminine. The model he used was probably written for a man, and in certain cases he also forgot to adapt to the feminine owner to the papyrus. Here I have highlighted some of the errors on the papyrus. Here you see he wrote in instead of ir. Here it en, so your father, instead of the enclitic particle iref. So father here means nothing. In this other example, the name of the god Amun is written just with one side, the beginning, because then there's Heru, which is the rest of the sentence. And so you see that in the first three instances, there are mistakes which were not corrected by the scribe. But in the last examples here, you see that the scribe wrote this sentence without the negative, without the M. So the phrase, the sentence, instead of being, do not eat me because I am pure, without this little, without the M, became, eat me because I am pure. This final example shows that the scribe proofread the text and identified the error. The missing M, the negation, was subsequently inserted above the line, as this omission would have severely affected the text meaning and, in the end, the destiny of the unfortunate deceased. A similar case, not in the Book of the Dead, occurs as concerns another spell from pyramid text, spell 204. As Kata Jasper highlighted, the original version of this sentence in the pyramid of Unas is, it is the arms of Ha, the god Ha, that repel his anger very well. And you see the verb der, which is written in the later occurrences, parallels, until in the temple of Hatshepsut. Here, there was a problem. Maybe the template had already this mistake due to the analogy of these two verbs, der, redi, And the version in Hatshepsut is, indeed, it is the arm of Ra that will cause him, because there's a second mistake on one of the wall, him or her, to be hungry. So the god causes the queen, the dead queen, to be hungry. This was probably, well, this was unacceptable. And so, in another late period version, the tomb of Pabasa, when this same formula is written in the courtyard, the scribe realized that this sentence, as it is in the temple of Hatshepsut, was not good for the deceased, and he added an N. So the verb is redi. He didn't go back to the original version, but the sentence is, indeed, it is the arm of Ha that will cause her, instead of him, to be non-hungry. So it was important to change this sentence to let Pabasa live in the netherworld, not being hungry. In contrast to Ani and Greenfield Papyri, another book of the Dead Papyrus that I am currently studying appears considerably more corrupt, exhibiting numerous errors, omissions, confusions, and inaccuracies. However, also in this case, taken as a whole, this long roll, which is more than 19 meters long, also gives the impression of a pretty carefully executed work with vignettes of very good quality. The manuscript belonged to Pasenegem ibn Nakht, known as Tutu, who was a stolist, a priest of Min from Akhmin. And as in the case of Ani's papyrus, it is a ready-made document where blank spaces were left open for the insertion of the deceased names and titles. This manuscript was probably written around the end of the late period and beginning of the Ptolemaic era, let's say around 340-320 BC. In the second column of the roll, so we are at the beginning of the papyrus following the title of spell 1, the name of Pasenegem ibn Nakht, together with his complete genealogy. This is the only case in the papyrus where the genealogy is written in such a developed form. This is written in a script similar to that of the opening section of the document. We may therefore assume that this part was made by the same skilled scribe responsible for the nearby columns of text. The task of adding the name of the deceased in the other blank spaces of the roll was then probably entrusted to another individual of lower skill and precision. You see the different instances where the name of Pasenegem ibn Nakht was added, not so carefully written as the other hieroglyphs. In this case, the scribe wrote it with much smaller hieroglyphs to fit in the place he had at his disposal. And in other instances, as in the papyrus of Ani, the name was completely forgotten. In some other instances, as you can see on the left, the name was written twice. The signs in the middle, I don't know, should be read Sa, sun, but Sa, Ra, seems to me pretty strange, but in any case, probably the second part should have received the name of Padiaménopé's father. Here, it is difficult to consider this a mere lapse. Given the immediate repetition, we must think that the scribe realized that he was writing exactly the same name and title twice. Perhaps he did not remember the name of the deceased father, but he wished anyway to fill the column until the bottom before beginning the next column with another spell. In other cases, the name appears where it should not. For instance, here the name is written after Uzir, but in this case, the scribe probably did not realize that Uzir here is not the epithet for the deceased, it's the name of the god himself. Or here, the scribe wrote the name of the deceased, Padiaménopé, instead of the name of King Menkaura Mykerinos, which is normally written in this spell, which is a spell 64. Other errors suggest faithfully reproductions of the template, sometimes at the expense of comprehension. We may ask, did the scribes truly understand what they were copying? Did they really pay attention to the content of the spells? This faithful, in these cases, for instance, which shows that he was really making a replica of the template, we see here he wrote the word urret, so the crown of Lower Egypt, cutting the word into two parts, ret, but he had enough place here to write the whole world. Or here, he wanted absolutely to finish the column probably as it was in the template, and he added some signs under the horizontal line, the lower horizontal line. Or, in this case, he left a blank spaces, even though nothing is missing. Actually, the text, the spell, is absolutely complete. Why did he left this blank space? Maybe the template had a blank space as well, or there was a kind of lacuna he could not understand. And in this case, there's a correction, because at first he wrote PS, but then he realized that this doesn't mean anything, and so he added the right word, pen, this. Although most errors were left uncorrected, some were amended, providing evidence, the last one, that the text was carefully or almost carefully reviewed. The addition of a forgotten portion of spell 42 at the end of spell 51 on the next sheet shows that in this case, someone checked the text. They realized that here, some parts of spell 42 were missing, and they added the missing part on the next sheet at the very end of spell 51, just leaving a small blank spaces between the end of spell 51 and this added section. This confusion and addition is something that happens, for instance, also in other texts. Here we have the offering list in the tomb of Montouamat, and the offering list, which is offering list of type A of Barta, as you see, the sequence of these of the words has a mistake, because the word, which is number 67, A67, is written after the place where it should have been. So probably also in this case, the scribe realized the error and he put the word a bit further. As concerns the vignettes, the draftsman did not complete his work on the papyrus of Padiaménopé. Indeed, the final portion of the papyrus is completely lacking in illustrations, which should have been placed within these empty frames. It can be inferred that the writing of the text took priority over the execution of the figurative scenes. The work may not have been completed, maybe due to Padiaménopé's death. In fact, it is unlikely that the template was also devoid of vignettes, all of them in the final part of the roll. It's quite strange. However, unlike what Barbara Lucia told yesterday, on this papyrus there's the omissions as well as the empty spaces for the vignettes never contain the hieroglyphs for Gem-Ush, found empty or found destroyed. In conclusion, the occurrence of corrections in the Book of the Dead Papyri shows that these manuscripts could undergo at least partial revision during the writing phase. It is therefore plausible that more skilled scribes in a workshop would check the work of less skilled scribes, or that a scribe might proofread the text he had just copied. In this regard, the colophon of the Book of the Dead of Yuya from the 18th dynasty is particularly revealing. It describes what was considered an ideal practice, although not always actually carried out. The sentence, this last part of the papyrus says, "Thus it," the book, the roll, "must proceed from beginning to end as it was originally found in writing, after being copied, checked, collated, and recorded sign by sign." Despite everything, however, it is precisely the errors in the broadest sense that prove particularly valuable and informative for us, as they allow connections to be established between different manuscripts. This is frequently evident in Padiaménopé's papyrus, where omissions of phrases or changes in names or toponyms correspond to those in two other contemporary Theban papyri, one in the Louvre Museum to the left and another one in London. The papyri to the right belonged to a lady, Etiero, who had no titles apparently, because no titles are written in the papyrus, but she was nevertheless a very beautiful woman with a wonderful hair dress drawn in the vignette. It is therefore possible that these two papyri, along with the papyrus of Padiaménopé, were copied from the same already corrupted template used in a Theban scribal workshop specialized in the Book of the Dead production. And this common source should then predate the beginning of the Ptolemaic period. From this brief analysis, it clearly appears that the risk of making any kind of mistakes when writing a manuscript was frequent and must have been a concern for Egyptian scribes, since such errors could potentially compromise the magical efficacy of the text. We've seen it with two examples where the N, not, im, not was added. Proofreading and careful oversight were occasionally applied to the copied text, resulting in the correction of some mistakes. However, this was not systematic at all. It is therefore worth asking whether the relative scarcity, or at times complete absence, of thorough scribal revision in the Book of the Dead Papyri, especially in high-quality manuscripts, might instead be explained by a preference for maintaining a graphically uniform text and thus a visually beautiful appearance or aspect. Even if errors were present, they were detectable only through careful reading. So they were probably tolerated rather than systematically corrected, so as not to disrupt the overall aesthetic harmony of the inscription. Moreover, this would probably have required rewriting entire sections of the papyrus, clearly entailing a considerable waste of time, especially considering that the scribes knew that no one would ever read those texts meant to be sealed in the tombs for eternity. They didn't know that one day Egyptologists would arrive. This phenomenon recalls what we can observe in some mummies of the Greco-Roman period, especially where pieces of wood were used by ancient Egyptian embalmers to reconstruct and restore mutilated corpses, maybe mutilated by the embalmers themselves during their work, before returning the seemingly intact mummy to their family. This is an example from a mummy in Naples Museum. This mummy has 3 hands. They found with X-ray that there's a third hand between the legs of the deceased, and here you can see that the feet were missing, and they put a piece of wood to give the idea and the form of the body. Even though in these cases we all know that considerable attention was given to the external presentation of the mummy, the treatment of the body was, on the contrary, largely overlooked. So, external appearance versus content, exactly as in the papyri, in some papyri at least. Several centuries later, the risk of making errors in copying text was considered so serious for medieval scribes, mainly monks, that they believed a demon existed called Titivillius, who collected or noted on a parchment mispronounced, misspelled, or skipped words, both during the service or in the manuscripts, to take to hell to be counted against the offenders. Titivillius was also said to intentionally introduce errors into the work of the scribes, and for this reason he was also called patron demon of scribes. We may wonder whether Egyptian scribes feared a similar judgment in the netherworld, perhaps before the god Thoth. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Silvia, for this so interesting conference. You showed, but we know that studying materiality of the papyri is very important and informs us on the scribes themselves. And I think it's particularly interesting for the student of the academy because they are very near the scribes when they have the ostracon in the end. In the hand, so now they know how they could make errors. So if you make errors, you are as the wonderful Theban scribes. So don't worry. So it was very. I could have many questions, but I think I'm not the only one. Concerning the correction marks, as you told, it's very rare. But I remember of a papyrus of the Vatican Museum that I studied, a small one because he was only 16 meters long. And the scribe made many errors, but there were marks in the margin and on the en bas, comment on dit, at the top, at the base, at the bottom of the papyrus, he corrected it. He put the right word, or so. It happens. At least it's once.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah. But I think you have many questions, so yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Silvia, for your meticulous and analytic textual examination. And I have one question. Did the ordinary ancient Egyptians believe that these errors, especially the ones related to the negative concessions, could result in the inefficiency of its function, the Book of the Dead, in the afterlife world?
We should ask to them directly, but well, I think that there were some mistakes that were more serious than others, because we showed two examples where the scribe added the missing negation or changed the sentence, for instance, for the pyramid text spell 204, in order to have a sentence which was good for the deceased. So probably in some cases this happened, and when they detected these kind of errors, they corrected them. But when there was a kind of difference between feminine and masculine, the dissonance, the pes instead of pen, for instance, probably they let them go, because otherwise they would, I think that one of the reasons, maybe, was not to change too much on the papyrus, because then someone would notice the correction more than the mistake. So it was important to have also a harmony in the manuscript. But for instance, also the parts missing in Passaneggiam Ibn Act, the scribe forgot to copy part of a spell. Well, he added that part some half a meter later, farther, because maybe he had thought that in this case, the missing part of a spell could somehow have a negative impact on the deceased. We can think this is an hypothesis.
According to what I understood, that the papyrus, the sheet or the text written has been kept in the workshop for a long time, and had time to correct it and keep it aside until it was asked to come to take the name of one of the deceased. I mean, they put the name later. So. Yeah. So is this the correction placed, put on the sheet while it was still in the workshop? Or I don't think it could be already chosen by the deceased. Another thing, who chooses the text he wants to put in his tomb or in his coffin? is it the deceased himself who chooses to put the chapter so on, or maybe it's not a chapter at the time, but is he the one who chooses them?
So as for the first question, I think that these corrections were made almost immediately when the text was copied, or just after a few maybe days, because as we saw, the scribe who added the missing part of a spell added it half a meter later. So it was not such a long period after he wrote it. But then, for instance, in Greenfield, where the scribe added this small m, it was probably, he realized immediately that he forgot something. As for the spells chosen, it depends, because the ready-made scrolls, as for instance the Book of the Dead of Ani, they were produced in workshop longer before someone would buy it. Yeah. So it was not the deceased, it was not Ani who chose, probably, except if there were different sheets of papyri, and he decided to put them, to choose someone and put them, and ask to put them in together. Actually, there are some parts where two sheets join that show clearly a correction in the lines and in the colors to fit two different sheets together. So maybe in this case, Ani chose different sheets and he put them together to have a long roll.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I ask another question? For the New Kingdom, of course, I think that all the deceased wanted the whole Book of the Dead, all the text of the Book of the Dead buried with them, maybe. But in the late period, I think they chose some of them, and they preferred some text than others, I think.
It's more on the contrary. In the New Kingdom, you can have well, there's no this long papyri with 165 spells are not attested. The sequence is different, and people could also choose to have a very small Book of the Dead with just 2 or 3 spells. It was also according of their what they could afford, the money they had. In the late period and in the Ptolemaic period, we have more very long papyri with this sequence of the Said recension sequence of spells from 1 to 165. So it depends according to the level of the buyer, of the person, and the period, the historical period. Yeah.
Ani had said that the order in the tomb, the scenes in the tomb, and the order of the text on the papyri are sometimes respected.
Yes, yes. Yeah, in the tomb where I work, in TT 33, the sequence of spells on the walls are respect the so-called
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this lecture, but I have a question. I would like to know whether the mistakes could increase or decrease according to the social status of the person or not. For high officials, does it decrease or increase?
Thank you for your presentation. I really like your discussion about the part of hieratic and the hieroglyphic. Some of them are written in hieratic, some of them are in hieroglyphic. And I wonder whether this kind of differentiation is really understood by Egyptians themselves, or do they really care about it? Because the differentiation between hieroglyphic and hieratic is made by Greek, right? So the terminology is derived from the Greek. And for Egyptians, probably the only terminology is Deshmet do not chatter, or would they really make a difference?
Just one last question concerning Annie's Book of the Dead. You told that there have been 6 scribes preparing the papyrus, and there is a majority of hieratic texts. So do you think, I don't remember what Giuseppina told about that, the parts written in cursive hieroglyphs, are they written by the same scribe or no?
Yes. And Giuseppina identified at least six different hands in this part of the text, of the inscription. So, no. I would say no. Yeah.
Oh, no more questions?
Thank you for the presentation. The papyri, they are very long, and I wanted to know, so proportionally to the length of it, are the mistakes very rare or extremely rare, something that we don't find a lot on the papyrus, and do we have examples of papyrus that wouldn't have any mistakes? Long papyrus with not any mistakes on it.
Well, thank you very much once more, Silvia. And I think everybody has enjoyed your lecture. And I think everybody is very happy of knowing that even Egyptian scribes could make errors. So we can. Thank you so much.